If you want to practice all of the new PTE questions using artificial intelligence on an online portal that has a similar marking to your real PTE exam, head over to masterpte.com.au to create a free account. Here, you can practice all 4 sections separately and receive instant feedback for all of your speaking, writing, reading, and listening. You can also view and compare your answers with others who have already succeeded in achieving a high score. Download 9090 Band's template for speaking, writing, and listening. Take mock test, receive instant result, overall feedback, and in-depth analysis which helps you pinpoint exactly where you lose points. masterpte.com.au, the best PTE practice software in the world.
The debt today is so high. It's 200,000 rupees. 300,000 rupees of peasants who have no capital. And they who know within a year or two, when they accumulate that kind of debt, they will never be able to pay back. Where is the debt coming from? It's coming from a seed that is costing 100,000 to 200,000 rupees per kilogram, depending on what you got. Seed that used to be free, used to be theirs. Pesticides each time, the more they use, the more they have to use. 12 sprays, 15 sprays, 20 sprays. Pesticide used in just the last 5 years in the large areas of India has shot up by 2,000%. That's why the free market and globalization have brought. And since we're talking about peasants who have no money, who have no capital, they can only buy expensive seeds and expensive pesticides by borrowing. And who lended that money? The same companies that sell the pesticides, which are the same companies that sell the seeds, as you know, are now also the major creditors.
The Education Leadership Initiative was started by Dean Bob Joss of Stanford Graduate School of Business. He talked a lot about the importance of education leadership. Education leaders need to be dynamic and entrepreneurial change agents. Managing is not enough. Increasingly, leaders must rise to the challenge of changing their organizations through innovative, problem-solving strategies. So we are combining forces from our School of Education and School of Business to support the development of management skills and leadership capacity for current superintendents and other central office leaders. The purpose of School of Education is learning, while the purpose of School of Business is management. Now many institutes are providing education leadership learning opportunities, for profit or non-profit. We want to make sure that here at Stanford, we are not only delivering the services but with good quality. The program incorporates case studies and research-based presentations, discussions, and exercises. Participants also collaborate and build relationships through group work. However, they must realize that it is their own responsibility to achieve and accomplish. What others can do does not indicate what you are capable of.
Laughter is one of the greatest therapies in combating adversity, and whole communities and nations have frequently relied on humor to get them through their bleakest time. On August 13, 1961, the barbed wire was rolled out of Berlin to create the Berlin Wall. For nearly 30 years, until it was dismantled, wall jokes proliferated, especially among those living in the East. Laughing was all that was left. Jokes about those who rule you, and sometimes those who tyrannize you, are a form of folklore that has existed in societies as seemingly different as communist Eastern Europe, Tsarist Russia, modern Egypt, 12th century Persia, and modern-day Iran. Humor can also be wonderfully subversive. It can protect self-respect and identity. In more totalitarian societies, laughter relieves, at least temporarily, the pressures and anxiety of political oppression. Political jokes may not in themselves topple dictators, but they can provide solace. In a democracy like our own, perhaps the trouble with political jokes is that they sometimes get elected.
I had been writing nonfiction for years, actually, but secretly wanting to be a novelist. When I first started writing at the age of 30, it was with the intention of writing fiction. But I took a little detour for 10 or 12 years and wrote nonfiction, which I have absolutely no regret about at all. I think it was exactly the right thing for me to do. But there was that dream tucked away inside of me to do this. And I remember reading something that Eudora Welty wrote, who is, the great novelist from Mississippi, who had a big influence on me, actually. She said, "No art ever came out of not risking your neck." And I think she's absolutely right about that. It felt that way to me at the time, and actually it feels that way to me every time I sit down to write something. Finally, in the early 90s, I took my deep breath and started writing fiction. It felt risky to me at the time to do that. And one of the very first things that I wrote was what I thought was going to be the first chapter of a novel called The Secret Life of Bees. I wrote it in 1992, and it is actually essentially the first chapter of the novel as it is now.
Studying law at university over 3 years gives you a really unique opportunity to acquire a much greater and much more mature level of understanding and knowledge of the law, which can be of real benefit to your career in the future. If you're not so sure if you want to study law, law can also be an incredibly helpful degree for a multitude of other careers. For example, politics, journalism, the charity sector, the United Nations. It can be a springboard to all these different types of careers. Why is this? Well, because of the way that we teach law. A law degree involves not only studying what the legal rules are, but really taking an analytical approach to the world around us. It involves thinking about why certain laws exist. Can they be justified philosophically? How have they developed historically? What social goals are they trying to serve? And how should the law develop in the future? So here at Cambridge, we're not just studying what the law is. We're talking about what the law could be, what the law should be.
Last week we talked about how people recognize objects and really how well people recognize objects, given how difficult the problem is, given how objects can be seen in all different sorts of illumination, in different positions, in different angles. And yet we are able to extract that information. We are able to take the visual stuff out there, interpret it in a way that allows us to recognize all the different things that we can see in our environment. Today we're going to kind of carry on looking at that. We're going to look at what's really a special class of objects. That's the human face. We're going to look at how we recognize human faces and how we do it quite as well as we do. We're really expert at recognizing faces. So again, we can think about how do we take that visual information and how do we transfer it into a form which allows us to put a name to a face and to do all the other clever things we can do with faces. So I'm going to start off again by just pointing out that it's a hard problem. Face recognition is a hard problem, and it's a clever thing we do. If you think about all the different types of faces you can recognize and all the different types of information you can get from the face, you kind of start to appreciate how well we can do face recognition.
According to the information from skeletons, as we don't have the real people to study on, our ancestors in Stone Age hunted animals for food instead of planting their food. That's why there was a wide variety of food. But the lifestyle was still difficult because they had infection diseases later. Although they had produced hundreds of food, the quality of diets was not good at all.
Talent is premium, and there is a war for talents in 1990s because of the talent shortage. Companies and countries are recruiting young talented people from different countries and sending young people to universities. Some young people immigrated after they graduated from the university. They compete with local students. Countries and organizations should put talents at the primary positions. The collapse of loyalty makes employees happy to change their workplace for higher income. There are three reasons. First, the change of nature of economy leads to increase in the talents demand and skills needed. Second, the shrinking labor force after the baby boom causes less supply of skilled workers, and the retirement of baby boomers will cause a shortage of experienced workers. Third, there is also a mismatch between what schools are producing and what companies need.
What's the literal definition of risk? Business schools use risk analysis. So what do you mean by risk? And we need a dictionary. When you look at the dictionary, this is literal definition of risk. What it says is, the definition, for example, the possibility of injury, a dangerous element or factor, chance of, degree or possibility of such loss, and so on. So risk has two parts. As you look at the literal definition of risk, one part is the consequence of some kind of particular danger, hazard loss, and the other is about the probability of it, the chance and consequence, okay? And then, at least just as English language concerns, when you look up the word of safe and safety, which you'll earn as, it's a little bit of a loop, a little circular argument that free from harm or risk, secure from danger, harm, or loss, the condition of being safe, and so on for all. And what do we take out of it? At least when we talk about safe, at least in English language, we are talking absolute something is safe or it sounds safe.
You've got sound receptors in your ear, and they're beautiful. We're not going to talk about them at any length, but there's little flappy, these little spiky things going along in your ear, and they can translate vibrational energy coming from your ear, hitting your eardrum, being translated into a vibration in the fluid in your ear, into a physical motion of these little receptors there, into an electrical motion, into an electrical signal that goes into your ear. So all that's pretty impressive stuff. We're not going to talk about the details of it, but I invite some of you who want to learn more about this, particularly MIT students, I think, find receptors to be really quite remarkable.
If you want to practice all of the new PTE questions using artificial intelligence on an online portal that has a similar marking to your real PTE exam, head over to masterpte.com.au to create a free account. Here, you can practice all 4 sections separately and receive instant feedback for all of your speaking, writing, reading, and listening. You can also view and compare your answers with others who have already succeeded in achieving a high score. Download 9090 Band's template for speaking, writing, and listening. Take mock test, receive instant result, overall feedback, and in-depth analysis which helps you pinpoint exactly where you lose points. Masterpte.com.au, the best PTE practice software in the world.